Welcome to another Backyard Professor video. You can hear the geese out in the back. The fog's just starting to lift off my lake that I'm at, and I'm discussing this argument of the Book of Mormon that there's absolutely no evidence in its favor. I disagree with that argument. Diane Worth, Decoding Ancient America, a guide to the archaeology of the Book of Mormon, has some very interesting things to say about some of the evidences in the Book of Mormon that I want to share with you. On the use of cement. Cement's a very interesting concept in the Book of Mormon. Helaman 3:7 says, "There being but little timber upon the face of the land, nevertheless the people who went forth became exceedingly expert in the working of cement. Therefore they did build houses of cement in which they did dwell." Now that's an interesting concept because it is specifically these little details that the Book of Mormon records that is understood to be in Mesoamerica. When the Nephites traveled to the lands north, they built with cement as they had done in the land southward. Many of the buildings in Mesoamerica are covered with a type of a stucco, which may be termed cement. In this way, they were able to mold designs as they wished. Murals were painted on this stucco with bright colors, actually. The exterior of buildings was covered with this stucco and carved on. They had reds, blues, yellows, greens, whites, blacks, browns. The making of cement or stucco is a difficult process, and it takes skilled craftsmanship to do this. It takes a great deal of limestone to build this stucco, to make this stuff, and what's interesting is it takes an even greater amount of wood to create a few cups of stucco. Today, visitors will notice a scarcity of wood. Scholars agree that in parts of the Mesoamerica, the forests were largely destroyed by 100 AD due to the making of stucco. Since the wood was scarce, the Book of Mormon specifically mentions that. It says the Nephites had timber shipped in from other locales. That's Helaman 3, verse 10. This is a perfectly logical and consistent use of details, because the Book of Mormon is recording what was actually occurring in their element there in Mesoamerica. That element has been discovered. Because of the lack of wood, they were using it to build the cement and the stucco. They lost the forests. The Book of Mormon mentions that. Very interesting. On the idea of roads, she says, "There were many highways cast up, and many roads made, which led from city to city, and from land to land, and from place to place." This is in 3 Nephi 6, verse 8. Roads connecting cities throughout Mesoamerica were raised up from the ground with stone, oftentimes overlaid with cement. The Book of Mormon refers to roads being cast up, and that is exactly how they built their raised highways in Mesoamerica. Archaeologists call these roads causeways. These causeways connected one city to another city, and spreading out like the spokes of a wheel from a central hub, there was a central feature, and then they all spread out. Looked like the spokes of a wheel. This was done during Book of Mormon times. Walled cities and fortifications. This is an interesting idea. "Thus Moroni did prepare strongholds against the coming of their enemies round about every city in all the land." Alma 5, verse 6. Becan, in the Mexican state of Campeche, is probably the most well-known city for walls and fortifications. Almost every pre-classic site dating from 400 BC to AD 250, which is right in the heart of the Book of Mormon times, is known to have a fortification surrounding it. The fortifications were necessary due to warfare throughout the land, according to the Book of Mormon. A ditch or a moat in front of a wall was often one way to make a fortification against enemies in Mesoamerica itself. Today, many of the walls are no longer seen because the stones were used by later cultures for their buildings, and there is evidence of this. So that's one way how evidence can disappear. It doesn't mean it wasn't had, it just means we don't have it today. It's very important to understand that in the archaeological record. It's amazing that 30 years ago, the Maya in the eastern parts of Mexico and Central America were considered to have been a peaceful culture, unlike the warring culture described in the Book of Mormon. Today, that picture's completely changed. They even sacrificed the enemy kings and soldiers in their war prisons. Building fortifications was necessary for survival. Those are just three quick areas: cement, roads, the specific details of the lack of lumber, so they went to cement, which is what happened in Mesoamerica. The specific details of casting up the roads and then overlaying them with cement, which is found in Mesoamerica, and the specific details of the walled cities and fortifications. She shows the actual city of Becan. You can see the wall surrounding the city. That's probably the most famous Mesoamerican city that was discovered with fortifications. Those three areas show us quite clearly that this argument that has been thrown out almost as a challenge to we LDS scholars and apologists, that the Book of Mormon has absolutely no archaeological proof, has no historical reality. That argument, based on the evidence we're gaining more and more and more of today, that argument is simply false.